GPT 5.6 Sol costs twice as much per output token as Kimi K3. $30 per million versus 15. That gap is real, verified, and it compounds fast at scale, enough to double your API bill overnight. Both models just dropped and people are already picking sides, so I ran them across 5 real tests. Speed, pricing, context, reasoning, and API reliability. Every number pulled from official docs and community benchmarks. No vendor money, no cherry picking. And honestly, what surprised me is that the cheaper model doesn't just win on price, it wins in ways I wasn't expecting. And the final verdict is going to depend entirely on one specific thing about your workflow. So this comparison is for anyone running high-volume API calls, processing long documents, or just trying to keep costs under control while still getting strong reasoning. Pick the wrong model here, and you could be paying 2 times more every single month, and that adds up fast. EVO Test 1, Inference Speed. When a model is slow, you feel it. Users bounce, agent loops stall, and if you're literally hammering it with requests, a 28-second wait for the first token is painful, and that latency gap between providers shows up on day 1 of production. Okay, so what I found is pretty interesting. Kimi K3 runs anywhere from 32 to 163 tokens per second, depending on which provider you use. GPT 5.6 Sol hits up to 750 tokens per second on Cerebrus hardware, but Sol has no published time to first token number at all, which is a real gap in the data. Take this with a grain of salt, because these numbers are running on totally different hardware and different workloads. K3's 163 tokens per second on Fireworks is a completely different setup from Sol's 750 on Cerebrus, and your actual experience depends on which provider you're routing through. Speed is a tie. I was expecting Sol to run away with this one, given that 750 tokens per second ceiling, but without comparable latency data, and with K3's provider range being so wide, there's no honest winner to call. So we're at 0 to 0, one test tied, and moving on. Test 2, pricing, and this is where it gets really concrete. If you're running a document-heavy pipeline and you push past 272,000 tokens in a single prompt with Sol, the price doesn't just nudge up a little. Sol charges 2 times the input rate and 1.5 times the output rate, which can wreck your unit economics fast. What surprised me when I pulled the numbers: Kimi K3 is $3 per million input tokens, Sol is 5, and on output K3 is $15. Sol is 30. Cached input is 30 cents versus 50 cents. And K3 keeps that flat rate all the way through its full 1 million token context, while Sol does not. Kimi K3 takes pricing, and it's not close. I honestly thought Sol might have some hidden discount tier or volume deal, but the published numbers are just worse across every line item, and that long context surcharge makes it even messier. So Kimi K3 goes up 1 to 0, with one test still tied. Test 3, context window. If you're feeding in a massive codebase or a long legal document and the model cuts it off or starts hallucinating because it ran out of room, that's a real workflow failure. And if it doesn't cut off but charges a surcharge for going long, that's a different kind of pain. Both models sit at roughly 1 million tokens, max. Kimi K3 is 1,048,576. Sol is 50,000, a difference of about 1,400 tokens that's basically negligible. But what I was not expecting is that Sol's surcharge kicks in at 272,000 tokens, so the effective, cost-safe window is way smaller than the headline number suggests. To be fair, if your prompts stay under 272,000 tokens, Sol's surcharge never hits you, and the context windows are pretty much identical. It's really only when you're pushing big documents, long code bases, or large conversation histories that K3's flat pricing becomes a meaningful advantage. Kimi K3 wins context window. I was expecting a tie since both sit at roughly 1 million tokens, but the pricing structure changes everything above 272K, and that flat rate is a real advantage for anyone processing large inputs. So Kimi K3 is now up 2 to 0 with one tie on the board. Test 4, reasoning and math. When a model fumbles a multi-step logic problem or gets a math derivation wrong, you don't always catch it immediately, and bad reasoning in an agent loop can cascade into a whole chain of wrong outputs before you even notice something went sideways. So here's what I found, and it's genuinely mixed. On the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, Sol scores 58.89 and K3 scores 57, which is a narrow gap. And K3 has strong published scores like 94% on GPQA Diamond and 88% on AM 2025. But Sol hasn't published those numbers, so I can't compare them directly. Reasoning is a tie, and honestly, that's the right call. Sol edges K3 by 1.89 points on the AI index. But without matching benchmarks from Sol, you can't call it a win, which puts us at 2-0 for Kimi K3, with 2 tests tied now. Test 5, API reliability, and this one matters a lot in production. If your model goes down at 2 a.m. and you have no SLA, no uptime guarantee, no published reliability data, you're basically flying blind, and a single outage in a customer-facing workflow can cost you real money and real trust. What surprised me here is that neither model has published any uptime, SLA, or reliability metric I could find. I went through official docs, model cards, and community sources and came up empty. So both sides are showing unverified on the scorecard, which is honestly a blind spot for anyone running production workloads on either of these. API reliability is another tie because neither side gave us anything to score. I was expecting at least one of them to have a published SLA. But nope. So if you're running production workloads, you'll have to test this yourself. And that wraps the scoreboard at Kimi K3 2, GPT 5.6, Sol 0, 3 tests tied. Kimi K3 wins on price across every line item. $3 input versus 5, $15 output versus 30. And it keeps that flat rate through the full 1 million token context with no surcharge. It's also the top open weight model on the AI index, and the only one here with consumer plans starting free up to $190 a month. GPT 5.6 Sol scores higher on the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index at 58.89 versus 57. It hits 750 tokens per second on Cerebrus hardware, which is a really fast ceiling even if it's not directly comparable, and it scored 91.9% on Terminal Bench 2.1 Ultra, which points to strong system-level reasoning for complex agentic tasks. Honestly, I went in thinking Sol's reasoning edge would matter more than it does, but 2 wins to 0 tells a pretty clear story. Output is $15 versus 30, so if you're running high-volume or long-context work, go Kimi K3. And if you need that last bit of reasoning performance and cost isn't the constraint, GPT 5.6 Sol is still a serious option.